All right. Questionnaire for Two Pussies.
When did you first realize you were a girl?
I was 1.5 years when my brother was born early at 4 pounds. That's when I knew girls were bigger and strong and that I was one of them.
When I asked the priest if I could be an altar boy, he told me that I was a girl. I guess I knew before then, but that was the first time I internalized my girlhood and understood that some things would be forbidden to my kind. Did you ever want to be a boy? If so, why?
The only time I ever wanted to be a boy was so I could play in Little League. I batted lefty and ran fast. Otherwise, there was no way. Boys were dumb. Tell them not to play on the railroad tracks, and they did.
Never once did I wish I had balls, a beard, or a penis. Never once did I want to be in a fist fight or play football. Never once did I wish I could go to war.
How old were you the first time a stranger looked at you funny? Where were you? Where was he? Where were your parents?
I loved buying penny candy at Terry's, flying saucers made of wafers with tiny sweet beads rattling inside, waxed lips and candy necklaces, pixie sticks and orange circus peanuts. One day Terry wasn't there and her husband leered at me from behind the register. I was 7. My parents had always thought Terry's was safe.
The first time I felt creeped out in public was in Manhattan. Maybe I was 12. Some guy made an odd sound and looked at me funny. My parents didn't notice, and I was glad they didn't. I was embarrassed, like my slip was showing. We wore slips in those days. Who was the first man you ever remember being leery of, and what would you say to him now?
My 8th grade English teacher reeked of gin. He stumbled towards me sometimes, grinning. Once he asked me to stay after class, but I felt pretty sure he'd forgotten. What would I say to him now? Because of you, I know the difference between an independent and dependent clause.
I would rather not comment. When did you go on your first real date?
In junior high, Tommy and I went bowling. Paul McCartney and Wings were singing Maybe I'm Amazed on the jukebox. It felt more than a bit sinful as we removed our footwear in front of each other, wiggled our toes, and slipped on our rented bowling shoes.
Not until I was 16. My date told me women were manipulative and prima donnas and always got their way. That men didn't stand a chance when it came to being in the world with women. He was 16 too. I wondered what had happened to him to make him think those things. We only had that one date. Sometimes I wonder if he got married and if his wife survived. Did you ever cry on a date because you were afraid?
I cried because he was swearing, looking at me instead of the road. I thought he would smash the car and kill us both.
I never cried, but I was scared to death of this one guy who took me to a park and was all over me in a second. What the hell, I thought, what had I done wrong?
Did a guy ever tell you you were frigid or a tease?
A couple of guys told me I was either frigid or a tease. Somehow, by some quirky happenstance of self-esteem and or reality, I knew they were being ridiculous.
As I made out with a stranger at the party in Brookline, I changed my mind and thought I'd give my recent ex a second chance. When I pulled away and said I had to be going, the stranger said, "Cock tease, bitch."
Did you ever have a kissing fantasy, a grabbing fantasy, or a rape fantasy?
I have fantasized about kissing Sean Penn, Rosario Dawson, one of my bosses, and the mail carrier who told me he was planning to go to Argentina to practice his tango and fly fishing. But never once did I fantasize that any of them raped me.
I never had fantasies about being forced to do anything I didn't want to do. Actually, I prefer reality to fantasy. That's why I write poems, not novels. I love this world. I love being a part of it, not someone else's idea of it or who I should be in it. Any final comments?
We would simply note here that more than 10 times a day, we feel unsafe.
And that really pisses us off.
Thank you. Another thing that really pisses us off is sometimes we can't even find our own car keys.
We're getting old. Yeah. Holy hippocampus, a conversation in couplets.
The human brain stores 1,000,000 gigabytes of memory. So why is it I can't recall where I plunked down my keys or orange flash drive?
If only I could access the words of Proust I read at 20, or what you said yesterday about how to treat a cold. Was it frankincense?
Frank remembers you so clearly, but you can't access his face, even looking at his picture. High school classmates, grade school teachers.
A blur. I've always wanted to tell you that my mother with Alzheimer's recalled her Carteret childhood in encyclopedic detail, but that was it.
Did she forget being a mother and your childhood? I love reimagined retro postcards. I left my baby on the bus, or I forgot to have children.
That's my mom. Unable to spell the world backwards by 55, DLROW. They say the brain alters a memory simply by remembering it.
That is why I remember my second grade accordion as gold, but in the picture, it's maroon. In one, my hair has a green tint, impossible.
Or ahead of your time, as always. They also say our short-term memory holds only 7 pieces of information at a time. Holy hippocampus.
Number 8, where did I park my car? Nudges out Conan O'Brien's punchline and whether or not I turned off the coffee pot. My remote key beeps.
But the kid who insisted on pushing my grocery cart is telling me where he snowshoes. My cell's ringing in the surreal distance of some pocket.
In my jacket or purse or reusable tote, and I fear someone I love is in trouble. An accident, a broken heart, a bounced check. Hello?
My brain needs an upgrade, higher resolution for those misty watercolored tidbits that pixelate rebelliously as I furrow my brow.
What I do remember is Bert's chalk sidewalk drawing turning into a painting when it rained. Or was it Mary Poppins magic?
I know you're not thinking I'd remember a movie I only saw 5 times, are you? What about that annoying link between memory and hormones?
Or that stress kills memory cells? I read that doing certain tasks can stimulate the growth of brain cells, but I can't remember which tasks.
Well, we're both good at math. Today I read that it takes the brain 80 milliseconds to process info. For that time, we're actually living in the past.
Okay, thanks, Maureen. This next poem is called Florida Dal Sonnet, and Maureen and I are each going to read a sonnet now, but we wrote them together, but we'll each read one. Florida Dal Sonnet. I love Fresh Market, but always feel underdressed, squeezing overpriced limes. Louis Vuitton, Pucci, Fiorucci, and all the ancient East Coast girls with their scarecrow limbs and joker grins. Their silver fox husbands, rosy from tanning beds, steady their ladies who shuffle along in miu-mius, not moo-moos, and make me hide behind towers of handmade soaps and white pistachios. Who knew I'd still feel like the high school fat girl some 30-odd years later? My Birkenstocks and my propensity for Fig Newtons? Still, whenever I'm face to face with a face that is no more real than a doll's, I try to love my crinkles, my saggy chin skin, my body organic with no preservatives.
And this one, also written by both of us, is called Anti-Disestablishmentarianism Sonnet. When Key West passed its symbolic resolution in support of same-sex marriage in 2004, I knew what was next. My lover would want a minister, a cake, the whole shebang. I was a happy outcast from the legal noise and noose of wedlock. I thought I was safe as long as I lived in Florida, state of restrictive laws, no women allowed to parachute on Sunday, no men allowed in strapless gowns. Once upon a time, I was felonious and free as a pelican brigade. I was endangered as a ghost orchid. But now I'm registered at Bed Bath & Beyond, fussing over a seating chart. What is marriage, you say, if not for the brave? And what is love, if not for all? Please pass me the gown and the parachute. That's dedicated to Lori. All right. If not joy, we wrote a poem that actually meant a great deal to us. I think, were you in Portugal for this poem?
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Albuquerque. Okay. It was really a beautiful back and forth for us. And we wrote 10 sections. By the time we got toward the middle of the poem, however, a friend of ours, a relative of a friend of ours, was raped. And we knew about it and we were very, very upset about it. And it happened in the middle of our poem. So we decided to not read the whole piece for you tonight, but to just read section 9 and 10, which is after this crime happened. So I just wanted to say that the young woman who was hurt has gone on to live her life and be a very strong young woman. So I just wanted you to know that. Okay, Denise.
Oh, Maureen, sometimes I squelch my happiness. The thought of rape just around the corner, then the actual rape. People we love. I hate cop shows. A man in blue determined to find the young girl's murderer. Why are the dead on TV so young and beautiful? And at the end of an hour, justice is served, except the girl is still dead. And every woman watching is reminded again how the world is ready to treat her. So I send a sort of light, which is nothing like the light from a screen. I send light that makes a protective shield around that young woman's magenta aura. Remember when you stopped my asthma attack with your warm palms? We were in a cab. I was choking, and you put your hands on my back, and I stopped. I once saw pink rising like heat from your fingers. In the Amazon, I saw a shrunken head, and as a guide explained the technique, the boiling, the taking the skin from the skull in one piece, I took flight with a red-bellied macaw.
And section 10, to actually leave our bodies is no easy trick, yet we excel at it, like soldiers in combat. I saw no foreshadowing of violence in our poem, did you? Maybe dogma, maybe teeth in a trash bin. It's winter, so what? This rape occurred in the South where oaks hold their leaves and bow to each other across centuries. When your breath eased on that ride through Manhattan, I was so deep inside my body, I could hear my blood and yours, the cab a hallowed space. Maybe evolution does violence to our molecules, reordering, replicating, coercing us to morph. Now I've got my opposable thumbs. I'm upright as a base. I know how to wear underwear made of silk to protect my bones in snow. What to do with our outrageous capabilities? I've wanted to tell you how, here in Colorado, winter geese are everywhere, ribboning the entire sky and honking with purpose, if not joy.
Thank you. Thanks, Maureen. I'm really glad we read that one.
Yeah, I am too.
So Maureen and I have one more poem to read to you, but before we do, we wanted to thank Tom and Mary again for being here and for the beautiful artist book they have made, honoring our work, and it's just been a fabulous process. And George for reading his spectacular poems, Judy for setting this whole thing up, Lenny for being the amazing Lenny and getting SoFloPoJo off the ground, and of course, all of you for coming tonight and all of you for listening. And we also wanted to give a shout out to there's an anthology that was published earlier this year called Grabbed, and that's where the first poem we read, A Questionnaire for Two Pussies, was first published, so we wanted to give a shout out to them. So this last poem Maureen and I will read is the last poem in the book, and is another Q&A poem called simply Questionnaires, and it was inspired by the playwright David Ives. And Maureen was really excited about his one-act plays, and one day when we were working, we worked in person when Maureen lived in Florida, and she brought the book, and in the introduction it talked about writing answers to questions that you didn't know what the questions were. So that's what this poem does and attempts to do. So you can try to guess what the questions are, we of course don't remember anymore what we asked ourselves, but you will just hear the answers.
And here it is again in pink. Pink and pink, pink on pink. Okay, thank you for your very kind letter about our collaborative work. Here are the answers to your questions.
1, longhand, shorthand, peacock blue, exquisite corpse, origami, bank receipt scribbles, Scrabble tiles shaken from the purple velvet bag, computer while eating candied orange slices.
2, after breakfast, during brunch, around many tables, eating, not eating, cartwheeling on beach, metaphorically, of course, as one of us has sore carpal tunnel wrists, in New York loft sublets, cyberspace, outer space, at Panera until the Wi-Fi runs out. Pre-Wi-Fi, we used phones. Pre-cell phones, we used phone booths, Superwoman style. Oil was written in Queens in a room that no longer exists.
3, yes.
4, no.
5, of course.
6, Uncle Will and Uncle Leo.
7, it was 1990. Our first poem, Ecofeminism in the year 2000, was very serious. We didn't really know what ecofeminism was, but it sounded serious, and we were serious back then, and we wanted to do something serious. We included a joke in the poem, which had to do with one of our spouses, and she has never forgiven us for that.
8, David Trinidad and Bob Flanagan.
9, ice cream sandwiches.
10, Surrealists.
11, no, we never have, too messy.
12,
when I was 10, I wrote lyrics to a series of country songs I twanged in my head. I never liked country music, though my father adored Tex Ritter's Blood on the Saddle. I wrote the lyrics because I saw an ad that producers were looking for lyrics and would pay big money. These were my first forays into poems.
It was May in the 7th grade. The nuns ran a poetry contest for the best poem about Mary, the Mother of God, etc., and I won. It had stanzas, maybe tercets. I remember it was very blue.
13, we've taken naps in the same bed. Does that count? Just kidding. We are two femmes, silly. Both of us, for better or worse, are attracted to male energy. Not that it's any of your business.
14, our first book was published by Tia Chucha. We thought we had arrived, but now Tia Chucha is defunct and our book out of print except for a few used copies on Amazon. How sad to sign a book for someone who has bought it used, who has crossed out the original dedication to Mary Jo.
15, pajamas.
16, we left our collaborative relationship for 2 years once, and the only ones who noticed were Christine and Jay.
17, when the Miami Book Fair gave us the Sunday 10 a.m. reading slot. Or maybe it was the time the neo-formalists called us witches.
18, when we saw our olive oil poems brought to life in a theater piece by Emily Rems. She directed men and women who wore black bun wigs and red skirts. How exciting to see our words come out of other people's mouths as though our poems were part of a breathing pop-up book. Maureen was overheard muttering, "I'm so overwhelmed," and weeping happily. Denise thought, wait a minute, why aren't we more famous?
19, yes.
20, yes.
21, Muriel Rickheiser, who else?
22, Caprice is the title of our latest book, and it's with Sibling Rivalry Press. Some of our friends asked us what the word caprice means. Others wondered if it meant we were changing our sexual orientations. No, we said, although one of us said later, maybe. Basically, we said, caprice is just caprice.
23, Miss Scarlett did it with Mrs. Peacock in the conservatory.
24, Bian Hinga.
25, did you mean poem or porn? Actually, for us, there's not a big difference.
26, Litany of the Fathers would be a good example of a poem about patriarchy gone awry after we read it to a real audience. even after we gave everyone an indulgence of 7 years and/or a plenary indulgence once a month if recited daily. Not sure why so many people got pissed off. Ingrates.
27. We wrote a crown of spells to ward off Susans to release us from the fears we had about two women who were threatening our romantic relationships with our partners at the time. They both had the same name, and neither was a Susan. A Susan one of us knew wrote a few years later to say, next time you want to say something about me, say it to my face.
28. We're not witches ourselves, obviously, or we'd have a lot more money, be really thin, and never age. But in a lot of our poems, we pretended to know a witch or two. Crashing Witch is about the witch you see riding her broomstick into doors. Recently, women are taking witches off broomsticks, which they say are phallic, and setting them in convertibles, which are still pretty phallic, but at least it would hurt a lot less as the witch crashes into a tree.
29. Pajamas.
30. Quote, but the true feminist deals out of a lesbian consciousness, whether or not she ever sleeps with women, unquote, Audre Lorde.
Thank you for listening. Thanks, Maureen.
Thanks, Denise. Love you.
You too.